Hello and greetings. This is an exercise involving an ellipse, and we'll take the standard equation of the ellipse to be x squared over a squared plus y squared over b squared equals 1, where a is the major axis and b is the minor axis. There is no loss of generality by taking that special case. Okay, so the diagram shows the ellipse in question, and f is a fixed point on the major axis. S is the focus of the ellipse, and P is her general point on the curve. Now, first of all, note that E, the eccentricity, is the square root of a squared minus b squared over a. Now, if F is a fixed point on the major axis and S is the focus, show that the minimum length of PF is when SF divided by SP is equal to E, the eccentricity of the ellipse. So note that if the x-coordinate of P is x, then the y-coordinate is b over a square root a squared minus x squared. Get that from the equation of the ellipse. So first of all, you note quite easily that SF equals AE minus T, and SP squared equals x minus ae all squared plus b squared over a squared times a squared minus x squared, which is x minus ae squared, and I've replaced b squared over a squared by 1 minus e squared, so that last expression is x minus ae all squared plus 1 minus e squared in one bracket, a squared minus x squared in another bracket. Now, pf squared is x minus t squared plus b squared over a squared times a squared minus x squared, and again replacing the b squared over a squared by 1 minus e squared, we get x minus t all squared plus 1 minus e squared bracket a squared minus x squared. Now, to minimize pf, or equivalently pf squared, we just differentiate with respect to x and get 2 times x minus t minus bracket 1 minus e squared times 2x equals 0, which simplifies to x minus t equals 1 minus e squared x, which is x minus e squared x, and so from that we easily get that t equals e squared x. So SF equals ae minus e squared x, which is e bracket a minus ex, and sp squared, multiplying that all out, the expression for sp squared, that'll be x squared minus 2aex plus a squared e squared plus a squared minus x squared minus e squared a squared plus e squared x squared, which simplifies to minus 2aex plus a squared plus e squared x squared, which luckily for us is a perfect square, to wit ae minus ex all squared. And so sp equals a minus ex. And then sf over sp will be e bracket a minus ex all over a minus ex, which just cancels down to e. And that does it. Thanks very much for listening.